Hi friends, welcome to World Maker Books. I'm Joy, and we are continuing today with the reading of Black and White by Mark Wandrey. We are in part 2, and we'll be reading chapters 3 through 5. So here we go, chapter 3. Hyperspace, July 3rd, 2037. Terry watched in amazement tinged with horror as the orca was born. Dr. Janig, in a wetsuit and using an alien rebreather, assisted the birth. Terry knew in the wild orca podmates helped in the birthing process. The problem was, none of the orcas were in any position to help. Just over 36 hours ago, Pegasus had gone through Sol's Stargate and into hyperspace. The sensation was a nightmare given birth. You were ripped apart only to be reassembled a heartbeat later. He'd read that philosophers called it a transcendent moment of uncreation creation. He just thought it sucked. He went through it in his cabin with his mom. He didn't want to ever do it again. The crew was unimpressed. Everyone in their group, they now thought of themselves as refugees, felt the same way. Except Doc, of course. He seemed to think it was interesting. Less than an hour after entering hyperspace, Terry found his way to Teddy Roosevelt's bridge to stare at the white nothingness of hyperspace. The opposite of normal space, it was the omnipresence of light. It didn't hurt to stare at. There was really nothing there. In school, he'd learned scientists believed the brain was incapable of understanding hyperspace, so it made the white you saw. It was curious, but he didn't have long to ponder it. The orcas were becoming restless. He'd gone to Kaval Otto to see. The orcas were swimming around and around their tank, sometimes bumping into the walls, sometimes the glass, sometimes each other. "Beyond, beyond, beyond," they were saying repeatedly. They wouldn't respond to the humans. "Shul," they also said intermittently. "What do you think?" his mom asked Dr. Orsage, the only one of their number who specialized in cetacean psychology. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe an energy field generated by the ship in hyperspace? It appears to be cumulative." Moloko, the pregnant female, slammed into the glass divider hard enough to make it vibrate. "We're going to have to sedate them." "That'll endanger her pregnancy," Dr. Janig warned. "If the glass breaks," one of Kaval Otto's engineers warned, "the surge of water may shatter the bulkhead. A couple million liters of water crashing around?" "What about the shore pod?" his mom asked. "Same thing," Doc said, floating in. "But the dolphins are fine. They're acting like they're meditating, but otherwise they're fine." His mom turned to Dr. Janig. "Do it. Fast." There were 2 Selroth aboard the Pegasus. The humanoid aliens were aquatic, able to breathe underwater. They looked human, but with shiny skin, similar to a dolphin, and their heads were hairless, with gills and big eyes. Colonel Kosmowski had agreed to loan them to the Institute refugees to help with the cetaceans. They went into the tanks with straps, and with the supervision of Dr. Janig, the process began to sedate the orcas. The other 3 were easy. Their weight was known precisely, and the correct amount of sedative was administered by the Selroth with a quick jab of a spear-like syringe. Every time they poked an orca, the huge predator would spin around and try to bite them. Terry gasped, afraid the orcas were about to kill the aliens. However, the Selroth dodged the attacks with ease. "Much easier to avoid than the Uhobo on our homeworld," one said after climbing out of the tank. They were just about to give Moloko her anesthetic when she arched her back and discharged some strange-colored fluid from her genitals. "Oh no," Dr. Janig said. "She's giving birth." The actual birth took only a few minutes. The baby's flukes came out, and before long half the body was protruding. The Selroth both jumped into the tank and were joined by 4 big, strong researchers. The other 3 members of the shore pod were sedated and lolling around in the tank, their rebreathers keeping them safe. Together with the Selroth, the humans struggled to secure Moloko by hooking dozens of fabric cargo straps around her flukes and midriff. They managed to restrain her, though only just. The baby burst out in a cloud of blood and amniotic fluids. Terry was unable to stop gawking even as the researchers corralled the baby and slipped one of the dome rebreathers on it. "It's a shame," his mother said, shaking her head. "Just a shame." "What?" Terry asked. "The baby looks okay." "It does," she agreed, "but Dr. Janig says it's only a couple of weeks premature. But with Moloko crazy like the rest of the orcas, there's no way that baby can nurse." "What does that mean?" "We might have to euthanize it." "Wait," Terry said, louder than he intended. "You're going to kill it?" "It's going to die, Terry. Can't you feed it?" "If we didn't have 9 insane orcas to tend to for another 5 days, maybe. It's never been done, though." "I'll do it," Terry said. He surprised himself. He had no idea what it meant. "Oh, son." "I said I'll do it." "Terry," Doc said, floating over, "I don't know much about these whales, but you really don't know what you're getting yourself into. There's no surface. You'll have to feed it underwater." "I know how to dive. You know that." Damn it, don't let the baby die. Terry floated over to the tank. The baby looked a lot like its mom, only smaller and chubbier. One of the Selroth was swimming alongside the baby as it tried to nurse. Moloko was spasmodically pumping her flukes, now drugged and unaware of her surroundings. The baby was pushed away without feeding. Doc looked at his mom, who was exhausted and looked sad. Could it survive? No orca has ever lived without being able to nurse. Well, then there's nothing to lose, Doc said. Terry's mom looked surprised at Doc's approval. In the end, she relented. It's your responsibility, she said. The assistants can make the milk, I checked, but they can't help you feed the baby. I understand, Terry said, nodding. I can do it. Okay, she said, let's try. Chapter 4. Hyperspace, July 5th, 2037. The crew of Kaval Otto ended up sealing a small compartment off the main hold for Moloko's baby. It provided better filtration and improved heat control. Terry spent several hours every day reading research files on rearing orcas. As his mother had said, a baby orca had never been successfully hand-raised. The closest one was born in Vancouver, Canada 35 years previously. The female calf only lived for 4 months. There was a great body of research on orca milk. Modern autochefs, which were able to synthesize a wide range of alien dietary requirements, allowed the Institute scientists to produce a perfect replacement. The problem was getting the baby to take it. Terry spent every moment he wasn't sleeping, eating, or studying in the mini-tank with the baby, trying to get him to feed. He knew the baby was a male, thanks to some of the research. The baby was listless from being separated from his mother at birth and was having difficulty swimming. I think it's the swimming problem, he told Doc the first day after the baby was born. Why do you think that? He asked. Well, I've watched hundreds of videos showing baby orcas feeding, and they all do it in motion. The baby's having trouble swimming. He keeps spinning around. We might be able to ask if they can spin the ship, Doc said, scratching his chin. What difference does that make? Terry asked. It creates pseudo-gravity. Terry stared. You know, the trick when you spin a glass of water over your head and it doesn't spill? Oh, right, we did that in class one year. Yeah, we'd be the glass of water out here. Pegasus would be the center of gravity. How do we ask? Let's go talk to the captain. Terry was used to passing through Pegasus every day. His quarters were in Teddy Roosevelt, and he moved over to Kaval Otto every day. He even stopped for a few minutes to see the Sunrise pod on his ship, and once to see the Wandering pod on Kaval Tesh. Like the Wandering pod, they were heavily sedated and closely watched. Even transferring between ships, he'd never seen more than the one hallway on Pegasus. After Doc made a call to the warship, he took Terry back aboard, and they went to the lift. Where are we going? Terry asked. The CIC. What's a CIC? Combat Information Center, sort of the brain for a warship. What about a bridge, like Teddy? The lift clanked and was pulled up in relation to the decks. Pegasus has a bridge, but they only use it for docking when it's better to have eyeballs. Ships this big, Doc? Sure, Doc said. There are bigger ships and space stations. What's bigger? This is huge! Well, regular battle cruisers are 20% bigger. Pegasus is an old design, after all. Heavy cruisers are bigger, but there aren't many of those around. Battleships are freaking massive. How massive? Terry asked as he watched several aliens move along a deck they were passing. Like a kilometer on a side. They're round usually, or egg-shaped, not fast, but bristling with guns, missiles, and shields. 1/2 mile, Terry said, letting out a low whistle. A booma on the deck they'd just passed whistled back, and he was afraid he'd just said something funny. Anything bigger? I've heard about dreadnoughts, but never seen one. They must be 1 mile at least. Probably just small enough to fit through a Stargate. The lift stopped and they floated out. Halfway around was a strange corridor going inward. It only went a short distance and stopped at a massive armored door. 2 winged Hussars Marines floated there. Unlike others Terry had seen, these were completely alert and armed. Dangerous-looking laser rifles were slung on their backs and pistols on their hips. They also wore armor. This place must be very important, he thought. Can we help you? The older of the 2 Marines asked. Yes, Sergeant. I'm Doc Abercrombie, here to see the Colonel. Is he expecting you? Yes, he is. The Marine nodded and spoke into a microphone connected to a minimalistic headset. He waited a second, apparently listening to the reply, then nodded. Is this Terry Clark? How many kids are going to turn up here? Terry wondered silently. Yes, he is. I'll take responsibility for him. Terry glowered, but the Marine nodded, then looked at him. Don't touch anything except marked handholds, do you understand? Of course, Terry said flippantly. Doc put a none too gentle hand on his shoulder. Look him in the eye and say, "Yes, sir." Terry, while surprised, did as he was told. "Yes, sir. I won't touch anything except handholds." The Marine nodded and allowed Terry and Doc to proceed. Why so serious? Because this is a serious place. The inside of the CIC was spherical and reminded him more of old submarine war movies, except old movies didn't have numerous Tri-V displays and aliens. Most of the crew was human, and Terry was immediately aware of the man in the center. Probably Doc's age, he was covered in tattoos and sported, of all things, a blue mohawk. Colonel Kosmalski was one of the most recognizable people on Earth, yet somehow Terry hadn't expected the blue mohawk to be real. It wasn't something you saw on military leaders. He thought the man would look more at home in one of the net game parlors in Honolulu, or maybe Houston, or perhaps a bar in an R-rated movie. Definitely not in command of the most powerful human-owned starship in the galaxy. "Welcome back, Doc," the colonel said. Terry thought the man's accent sounded strange. Like maybe he was from Russia? The winged hussars always sounded exotic and strange to him anyway. "Good to see you again, Lawrence," Doc replied. "What can I do for you?" "This is Terry Clark. He's Madison's boy." "Welcome to the Pegasus CIC," Colonel Kosmalski said. He had a boyish smile, which Terry found disarming. "Thank you, sir." Terry was concentrating on hanging on to the handhold he'd nabbed when they floated in. An alien who looked like a big white rat was strapped to the workstation his grip was attached to. It eyed him suspiciously with little, black, beady eyes. "We have a request," Doc said. Colonel Kosmalski made a gesture, and Doc continued. "You might have heard that hyperspace is proving problematic for the orcas?" "Yes, my physician mentioned it in our briefing. She said the dolphins appear fine." "They're not 100%, but they aren't as weirded out as the orcas," Doc explained. "The effects were bad enough, but a pregnant orca gave birth prematurely." "I'd heard about the birth, not about it being preemie. Is it going to survive?" "We don't know," Doc said, then put a hand on Terry. "Terry here is trying to tend to it, but there's a problem." "Gravity," Terry said. He swallowed before continuing. "The baby calf can't feed because his mom is catatonic, and I think the lack of up and down are just playing hell with him." "Calf?" Colonel Kosmalski asked. "You call a baby cetacean a calf," Terry explained, feeling uncomfortable trying to educate a commander of one of the Four Horsemen. Kosmalski laughed and shook his head. "You learn something new every day in this big galaxy, but seldom about your own planet. So, what would you have me do to help this calf?" "We request you spin up Pegasus to give us some artificial gravity," Doc said. "Please, Colonel, it might give the poor thing a chance." "It's not exactly a simple thing," the Winged Hussars commander explained. "We have to secure from zero-G stations and have everybody on all 4 ships ready for spin." "I'm sorry," Terry said, looking at the deck plate. "Don't be sorry. I'm just explaining that it's not an insignificant request." He looked at Doc. "You think it would work?" "I don't know," Doc said. "I'm no marine biologist. Neither is Terry, obviously, but the explanation makes sense. I put it under 'it couldn't hurt' myself." Colonel Kosmalski ran a hand through his blue hair and grunted. Terry noticed one of the tattoos on the man's arm was moving. He'd never seen a tattoo move before, and lots of surfers on Molokai had them. He tried hard not to stare. "Okay," the colonel said eventually. "I'll order spin." "Oh, thank you, sir," Terry blurted, and the colonel's smile returned. "Best I can do will probably only give you 1/4 gravity, though. Any more, and that hunk of junk Teddy Roosevelt is liable to come apart at the seams." "Thanks," Doc said. "I owe you one." Colonel Kosmalski snorted and made a dismissive gesture. "Means I still owe you a dozen. Get off my CIC, landlubber." "Aye, aye, Captain," Doc said, and saluted. Kosmalski snorted again and flipped Doc the middle finger. Doc took Terry in tow and led him back toward the lift. "Was he mad at you?" Terry asked, glancing back into the CIC as they left. "No, grown-ups just talk that way sometimes." "I hope I don't act like that when I grow up," Terry thought. The 2 Marines guarding the exit nodded to Doc and pretended Terry didn't exist. They were waiting for the lift a minute later when the ship's PA made a buzzing sound, and a woman's voice spoke. "Attention all hands! Attention all hands! Secure from zero-G operations and prepare for spin in 15 minutes. Repeat, prepare for spin in 15 minutes. When they got back to Kaval Otto, the crew were rushing about, grumbling and wondering why the Pegasus captain had decided to spin more than a day after entering hyperspace. Apparently, doing it that way wasn't normal procedure. Terry didn't offer to explain to them. When the big warship started spinning on its cylindrical center of mass, the 3 attached ships experienced the highest gravity. As Colonel Kosmalski had said, a meter in Kaval Otto reported they were under 0.3 Gs. Terry quickly returned to where the orca calf's tank was and checked on him. Doc warned him to be extra careful after a couple of days in free fall. People sometimes forgot and injured themselves, which was no doubt part of the Hussar commander's concern. The inside of Kaval Otto seemed even more misshapen. Ladders were at odd angles, and some doors opened up or down instead of sideways. Clearly the ship was not intended to be spun in this manner at all. When he reached the tank, Terry was delighted to see the baby was swimming now, and no longer spinning much or bumping into the sides. He adjusted the lighting so it only came from up in the compartment. That helped even more, and he saw the baby watching him through the glass. He loaded a big bottle, slipped into a wetsuit, and grabbed one of several rebreathers hanging on the side of the tank. Getting in was trickier now. He had to drain some of the water because the door would have dumped it all over the deck. The captain wouldn't appreciate that. When he did, it made an airspace, and the baby surfaced even though it wore the rebreather. Acting on instinct, Terry removed the orca's rebreather. The calf immediately spent several minutes just circling with his little dorsal fin up in the air, breathing every minute or so. "Okay," he said, "how about some food now?" He slipped into the water, and the calf came over to push at him with his nose. As the newborn weighed more than 150 kilos, Terry was a little alarmed to be shoved around. For the first time, he was aware he was in the water with an apex predator. It was a newborn, sure, a newborn with 50 or so sharp teeth. He did his best to remember that an orca had never hurt a human in the wild, and brought the bottle around. "Give this a try." The orca calf pushed the bottle aside and nudged its nose into his ribs. "Oof," Terry said. "Why are you doing that?" The calf did it several more times. Then Terry remembered the videos of orca calves feeding, and he held the bottle against his stomach, the big blunt nipple pointing out. The next time the calf tried to nudge him in the ribs, the bottle was between them. "Come on," Terry urged, and rubbed it against the calf's mouth. He gave the bottle a squeeze, and rich white milk spurted into the water. It was all the calf needed, and he latched onto the bottle. The videos paid off again. Orca young didn't suckle. The mom's milk was under pressure, so the calf just bit down and the milk flowed into its mouth. Terry squeezed and the liquid flowed. The calf backed away and paused. Terry watched for any sign that the little guy had spit it out. Nothing. In fact, he came in for more. "Yes!" he crowed and squeezed hard. "Way to go, kid!" Terry looked over and saw Doc sitting on an equipment bench outside the tank, grinning from ear to ear, flashing a thumbs up. Terry had never been happier in his entire life as the calf emptied the bottle in mere minutes. Chapter 5. Karma Star System, Crest Region, Tolo Arm, July 9th, 2037. "We're about to drop out of hyperspace, Terry." He looked up from the orca calf. His mom was standing in the bay's hatchway, leaning slightly to compensate for the ship's strange angle. Terry nodded and pulled the bottle from the calf, who snorted water from his blowhole and tried to snatch it back. "Wow, he's really coming along, isn't he?" "Yeah," he said, smiling. "He's nuts for this milk." "You putting the extra antibiotics in?" "Yes," he said. The previous morning, a blood test showed the calf had a slight infection. Apparently, minor infections weren't uncommon for newborns in captivity. It might even be normal in the wild. Nobody knew. So Dr. Janik had prescribed an antibiotic. The calf hadn't even noticed. "He doesn't care. He's just hungry. Hey, stop that!" The calf had nabbed the bottle again. "Here," his mom said, and came over. With her help, he was able to get the bottle away from him. The calf gave Terry a playful shove with his big, wide nose. "Better get his breather on." "Are we going to have to stop spin?" "No, Pegasus said we'll continue spin, but Dr. Janik's worried about the orca's mental health, and the calf is an even bigger unknown." Terry nodded and took the rebreather from a strap inside the tank where he'd been storing it. The calf floated on his side and looked at Terry with one eye. "Have you had it back on him at all?" "Oh!" She stopped in surprise when the calf swam over and helped Terry put the rebreather on. "Wow!" "Yeah, he's super smart." Terry made sure it was set properly, adjusting the strap slightly so the plastic dome was exactly over the calf's blowhole. Then he climbed out of the tank and sealed the door in case zero gravity returned. "He's learning fast. Dr. Janig was talking to me this morning and said you'd talked about the idea of performing implant surgery on him." "We did talk about it," she agreed. "We want to wait until he's a couple months old and his mom understands." "Have you figured out if she'll be able to take over nursing?" "Probably not," she said. "We checked Moloko a few hours ago and verified she has almost no milk production." She shrugged. "She never successfully nursed. We'll have to see how it goes. You still okay to take care of his feedings for 2 years?" "Whatever it takes," Terry said. "I promised." She smiled and pulled him into a hug. "You said we're coming out of hyperspace?" She checked her watch. "In a few minutes." "Will it suck as bad as going in?" No, she said, just feels like you're falling. What if you're in zero gravity? Apparently it doesn't make any difference. Space is weird, Terry said. His mom laughed and nodded. It sure is. Prepare for hyperspace emergence was announced over the PA on Cavalato. Despite her assurances, Terry hung on to the hug. His mom didn't say anything. She just waited. Before long, he felt it, a strange falling sensation which made his stomach jump despite all the hours he'd recently logged in zero gravity. Just like entering hyperspace, it was gone in an instant. That's it, his mom said, and they both turned to see how the calf was doing. He looked at them curiously, seeming not to have noticed anything was different. Welcome to Karma, little guy, she said. Hey, he needs a name. She looked at Terry. So, what is it? I can name him? Of course, you're taking care of him. Terry looked at the calf, who was watching him. Probably still hungry, Terry thought. He took out his tablet computer and typed in some searches. The other orcas were all named using Hawaiian words. How about Pokole? Hawaiian? His mom asked. Terry nodded. I don't know what it means. Short, he said. The calf was born early, so I thought it made sense. I like it, she said, and went over to the tank. Welcome to Karma, Pokole. How does it feel to be the first orca calf born off Earth? Pokole spurted water on the tank hatch. Maybe that means he's happy, Terry suggested. Probably just gas, his mom said. An hour after they'd arrived in Karma, Pegasus cast the 3 transports off and bid them farewell. Terry heard the conversation where his mother and her senior staff thanked Colonel Kosmowski for coming to their rescue. I am happy to have helped, the colonel said in his thick Polish accent. My wife Amelia has helped you many times, so how could I refuse when Pegasus was in Seoul and you were in such dire need? Did you hear what happened? Doc asked Terry. No. When the Earth Republic demanded Kosmowski turn around and bring us back or they'd send the military, the colonel dared them to try. Holy cow, Terry said. Yeah, Doc said and chuckled. These horsemen are tough and independent. Nobody threatens them. What about the 3 transports? Terry asked. They don't belong to the Institute, do they? Oh, hell no. The Institute couldn't even afford Teddy Roosevelt, and I doubt even the United States could afford Kaval Tesh or Kaval Otto. They're all leased for our use by the Winged Hussars. I think the captains all owed the Hussars a debt or a favor. I don't know. An awful lot of that kind of thing goes on with mercs. I always thought it was money. Oh, lots of money, too, Doc said. The orcas began to come out of their drug-induced slumber not too long after Pegasus cast them off. Pokole's tank was connected to the shore pod's tank, and Terry watched as the adults began to come around. Back, Cray said, the first to speak. Back beyond. Are you okay? Terry's mom asked. Back, Cray repeated. One after another, the others came around, with Moloko the last to begin speaking. Calf gone? You had your calf, just as you and the other orcas began to... She struggled with a way to say it. After you lost control. Beyond take calf mine? Your calf is still alive. Alive? Where? She nodded to the researchers, who opened the little tunnel, and Pokole swam in. The calf swam over to Moloko and instantly began to nuzzle her, and everyone in the hold breathed a huge sigh of relief. Mother and calf were reunited and acted as if nothing was unusual. Moloko spoke to the calf in non-words, deep subsonic noises the translators didn't recognize. It's like she's singing to him, Dr. Orsage said, taking notes as usual. Pokole, Terry said. The calf is named Pokole. My calf Pokole? Moloko asked. Yes, Terry said. Is that okay? Sound right, the mother orca replied. I know milk, she said. How long beyond? Ulibka, the other female, asked. Over 5 days, Terry's mom explained. How feed? Moloko asked. Terry explained. Warden figure out, she said. Warden everything figure, Cray agreed. We couldn't figure out what was happening to them, Dr. Patel said. The other doctors nodded in agreement. Can I help feed Pokole still? Terry asked. Moloko nudged Pokole over next to the glass and hummed at him, then bumped the glass in front of Terry. The calf nodded vigorously in an unmistakable gesture. Pokole liked Terry. I like Terry. This good. Excellent, Terry said. I'm very proud of you, his mother said. He beamed up at her. What did it feel like? Dr. Orsage asked the orcas. Do you understand why you lost control? Beyond, Cray said. Shul cry. Shul cry. What do you think that means? Terry's mom wondered. I have no idea, the psychologist said, and made notes. Later, the 3 transports docked together. Teddy Roosevelt was the only one of the 3 with multiple docking collars, so she served as the hub. It suited the marine biologists and staff just fine, as it put them in the middle of all their charges. The conglomeration of ships was moored to the remains of an ancient mined-out asteroid named Karma Theta 2. The planet of Karma was thousands of kilometers away, a blue-green ball visible from Teddy's observation dome. With nothing more to do, Terry settled back into the cramped cabin he shared with his mother. Teddy was so filled with humans it smelled like sweat and pee to him. The captain said they were 20% over capacity, but said human ships were made to take it. Terry wasn't sure he'd agreed, by the smell at least. Someone knocked on the door not long after he'd gotten there. "Anyone home?" Doc's voice asked. "Come on in, Doc," Terry said. The door creaked from rust as it opened. "Hey, kid, how'd the reunion go?" "Great. Moloko took to her calf right away, and vice versa. Moloko even wants me to keep feeding Pokole." "Is that the calf's name?" Terry nodded. "Awesome. Your mom said Moloko didn't have any milk." Terry nodded. "Hey, I just want to say I'm proud of you for standing up and helping after how bad it was leaving Earth." "If I hadn't, Pokole would have died." "Exactly, but a little kid would have been too busy feeling sorry for himself. What you did was what a grown-up needed to do, a man." Terry smiled so hard he felt tears making his vision blurry and wiped them away. "He was so tiny I couldn't let him just starve or get put to sleep." 400 pounds is tiny?" Doc asked. Terry laughed. He had a point. "I wanted to stop by and say goodbye." "You're going?" Terry asked in surprise. "For a while. I'm going over to Karma Station to talk to some friends. Maybe see what I can do to put some pressure on Earth to let us come home without being arrested." "Do you think it's possible?" Doc shrugged. "I don't know," he admitted. "What I do know is that we can't stay here forever. Colonel Kosmalski said we could use the transports as long as we needed, but he didn't mean forever. So I'm going to go see what I can do. I made a few friends among the mercs." "It sounded like Colonel Kosmalski pissed off the government," Terry said. "Yeah," Doc agreed. "He has that effect on people. You keep helping out as much as you can, okay? Your mom depends on you." "I'm still just a kid." "Not in my eyes," Doc said, then gave him a quick hug. "Hey, Doc?" "Yeah?" "How did you have the code to our apartment back at the Institute?" He gave Terry his appraising look. "You don't miss much. Probably make a good seal. Your mom and I have been seeing each other for the last month or so, after her divorce to your dad was final." He looked Terry in the eye. "We didn't tell you because we were afraid you'd take it the wrong way." "I've known my mom and dad weren't happy together for a while," Terry told him. "Kids notice this stuff, even when we wish it wasn't happening. Are you in love?" "Huh," Doc said with a grin. "I don't know if it's that cut and dried. Let's say we really like each other." "Good," Terry said. "I like you too." Doc grinned. "Feelings mutual, kiddo. You had a hand in getting Mom healed, didn't you?" "What makes you think that?" Doc asked, his eyes twinkling in the cabin's low light. "You sent a message to my dad saying you had friends who might be able to heal her. He refused, but she suddenly got better a couple weeks later. Was it those nanites I heard about?" "Let's just say she got better and leave it at that. I gotta run." "You mean fly," Terry said with a grin. Doc laughed and was off. Terry slid into his hammock, hooked the straps across his legs, and pulled out his tablet. The ship had a network, and it was now connected to the GalNet. He grinned when he saw it was an unrestricted node, unlike the one back at his school in Molokai. For a second, he wondered about adult content, then remembered the Galactic Union didn't care about such things. Besides, he didn't think he'd be too interested in pictures of naked aliens. His mother had mentioned when they got to Karma that Terry would be able to send emails home. They just had to be under a certain size, which was 1 gigabyte if he remembered right. It was like the Union's version of the Postal Service, only you never knew how long it would take to reach a destination. Union-free messages weren't like radio transmissions. The messages were bundled together and sent to every ship leaving the star system that was going in the right direction. Since they were just one transition from Earth, the captain said it would get there pretty quickly. The first message was to his father. Terry still felt conflicted about leaving him behind. Of course, everything his mom and Doc had said about him looked to be spot on, but that didn't change the fact that he was his dad. Terry had done some pretty boneheaded things too, and Dad had always forgiven him. "Dear Dad, I'm sorry I didn't have the time to say I was leaving, or even say goodbye. We found out they were coming to arrest us. I know you must have done what you did for a good reason, only I wish you'd told me. I feel sad, like maybe you did it on purpose." He erased the last sentence. "I wish you'd said something. Please write back. I want to know how you are. Love, Terry." Next, he wrote a quick note and group addressed it to his friends at the middle school. He was well, and nobody better be saying he'd been kidnapped by aliens. He smiled at his own wit. He said they were trying to figure out how to fix everything, and they'd left to protect the cetaceans. The last one he wrote was the hardest. It was to Yui. He decided to record it on video, which meant it had to be short. "Hi, Yui," he said, and waved lamely at the tablet's camera. "I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm sorry. The government was going to have us arrested and kill the cetaceans, so my mom got the Wingtosaurus to take us off planet. If I'd known, I don't know if I would have gone. You're like my best friend in the whole world." He shook his head. "In the whole galaxy now." The orcas got really sick in hyperspace. Moloko gave birth early, and I had to help save the baby. It's a boy, and I named it Pokole. I saved him, Yui. I watched all these videos and figured out how to get him to feed. Hyperspace didn't bother him like it did the adults. Moloko and the others came out of it after we got here, and she likes the name, and I get to keep helping feed him because Moloko's milk isn't working anymore. He glanced at the file size and saw it was already more than half filled. I only have a few seconds more video, so I'll say bye. I miss you. Please send a message back. Bye. He stopped recording. The computer said it was the correct size, and he used the ship's Galnet node to properly address it to her. It felt strange addressing it to Toluarm, Crushed Region, Sol System, Earth, then her actual address. Before, he'd just used her email address. Then he hit send. The free message system only let you send one message per day per star system. Sending bigger messages, or one guaranteed to reach its destination via the most direct route, cost 15 credits and up. He whistled. 15 credits translated to $450,000. He had about $150 on his yak, so that was out of the question. He decided to send the group email the next day. Terry stowed his tablet, reached back over his head, and shut off the little LED light, throwing the cabin into absolute darkness. He'd been surprised by just how dark it was in a ship with only a few windows. It wasn't quiet, though. Teddy Roosevelt was always alive with sounds. Fans were running, the distant fusion power plant was always humming away, and oftentimes the banging of crewmen fixing things could be heard. In some ways, it was reassuring. He wasn't alone, despite being trillions of kilometers from home. Only, was the rickety Earth freighter now his home? He drifted off to sleep, hoping it wasn't. Okay, that's the end of our reading for today. We'll come back in a few days with chapters 6, 7, and 8. We hope you enjoyed what we read today, and if you did, please give us a thumbs up, a like, a subscribe, and a share. Those things help us out a whole lot. We'll be back in a few days. Hope to see you then. Bye. Come on. Say hi to the nice people. Look, Poyo. Poyo. Look, say hi. Hi, peoples. I just want my morning loves. Yeah. That's my good girl. Say bye. Bye.